Us Dragon Age fans have been eating nothing but crumbs for over a decade now. Finally, we have some news on the next Dragon Age. I want to talk about some of the things revealed first before I go into my concerns. I'm just going to list these as bullet points to go through as quickly as possible, because other people have probably done this way more in depth than I am. This is given my 2 cents. So the first official 15-minute gameplay is premiering on June 11th. So we'll get a better idea on what the game looks like and plays like, there, compared to some of the leaks we saw a few months ago. So we know now there are 7 unique companions with deep and compelling storylines. Now, I just want to ask this. I'm throwing this out into the stratosphere here. Can we finally get a female dwarf companion? Specifically one that I can romance. Seriously, all of those short stacks in Baldur's Gate 3 being unromanceable was a crime, okay? And it needs to be rectified here. I know we had Scout Harding in Inquisition, but I want like a full-fledged companion. Thank you very much for science, for me. Let's go. New title is being reflects the story's group of companions. So, Veilguard, so Solus, which was Dreadwolf, still plays a big role. Honestly, I'm not a huge fan of this title change. Dreadwolf just sounds cooler to me, but they obviously want to highlight the new team more than the villain. So, like Veilguard, it's essentially like, Dragon Age Inquisition. You were the Inquisition. Players will take on the role of an original protagonist similar to the Warden, Hawk, and the Inquisitor. This makes sense and honestly welcomed. Just please don't ruin the Warden. Inquisition handled them perfectly. They are still out there trying to change the world in meaningful ways, a la finding a cure to the calling, off-screen. You and your companions make up the Veilguard, protecting the Veil and taking down a new threat unleashed upon Thedas. I'm assuming Solus is still the big bad here, so he's the new evil threat, but there is another villain they have yet to highlight. So, player agency is very important. Created a story where you can impact the world and companions around you, obviously, as it should be. There's no need to go into depth with this. Each companion intended to represent a different factions in the game. Each have their own arcs with stories of love and loss, each with meaningful choices and emotional moments. Bioware was a top-tier developer when it came to companions. Let's just hope they still have it in them. Players will visit more regions of Thedas across a deeper variety of biomes than any Dragon Age before it. This is good on paper. I just hope it's better than how Dragon Age Inquisition handled it. That game felt more like a single-player MMO, which was one of my least favorite parts about it. They also teased another villain beyond Solus. I don't want to get too into deep, this is quote-unquote, I don't want to get too into deep into spoiler territory, but I can say that the Dreadwolf is not the only god players need to be worried about, unquote. I would think Solus would have been enough, considering how they set him up in Inquisition and the DLC, but this is fine, and I'm looking forward to who it could be. Combat was a big focus for the team. Will feature an ability wheel that you can use to pause, designed to give players more direct control over their characters. There was a leak a few months ago showing some of the combat. It definitely looked more like an action RPG, but who knows what's changed since then. We'll find out June 11th, but I certainly have high hopes. Players can bring 2 companions along, similar to Mass Effect. This is probably the biggest change. Dragon Age has always had 3 companions you could bring. Mass Effect always had 2. So making the games feel closer together with just a change of setting seems like a good idea to me personally. It's kind of like what the Elder Scrolls and Fallout do. They're 2 very similar games, with the only thing being different is the setting, which is vastly different. Also, the live service and multiplayer elements were thankfully dropped after the disaster that was Anthem. So this is just a straight-up single-player RPG, the way it should be. Okay, all those out of the way. Now we get to some of the worries I have about this. I have 2 major ones. I'll go through them quickly because I don't like really making long videos and make people watch super long things. Just get to the point and let's go. My 2 major ones is, the first one is the big elephant in the room. This is a game post Baldur's Gate 3. In terms of RPGs and companion characters, this is the new gold standard, especially for the casual audience. Can the new Dragon Age live up to not only its own hype of not having a new game in its franchise in over 10 years, but also the hype that Baldur's Gate 3 created for all RPGs going forward. It's a tough hill for BioWare to climb, and I know it's unrealistic to hold developers up to that specific standard, but this is BioWare. They used to be one of the best, if not the best, RPG developers in the business. And that brings me to point number 2. This is no longer the same BioWare it used to be. Not even close. They haven't made a great game in over a decade, and not even a good game in at least 7 or so years. BioWare today is a very, very different BioWare from the 2000s and the early 2010s. That's my biggest worry about all of this. And if Veilguard isn't a slam dunk for BioWare, then what happens for Mass Effect 5? There is so much pressure riding on Veilguard for BioWare to prove to its fans that they can still be the BioWare that we all grew up with and loved. Hopefully, what they show in a couple of days blows us all out of the water, and that maybe, just maybe, BioWare can finally be the top RPG developer it used to and deserves to be.